Hi everyone, welcome to Tech Talk Tuesday. I'm Rehman. I'm the co-founder of Codeschool.pk. The idea of this Tech Talk is just to bring in leaders from the tech industry in Pakistan and beyond and just hear from them in a way that is easier for people outside the industry to really understand what's going on and how their lives are going to get impacted today. So I'm extremely excited to introduce our guest today. He is a leader in the tech industry, not just in Pakistan, but in the US as well. He has been programming for over 2 decades. He is a co-founder of Code School and my little brother. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Asad. I'm one of the co-founders of Code School. My background in computing and programming started when I was around 12 years old, where I'd learned how to code by myself. I went and found a bunch of books about programming. I learned C, C++, assembly. And then after high school, I went to college. I did my undergraduate in computer science. And right after college, I started working in iPhone game development. And I spent about 5 years doing that across various companies. And then I moved into web development, working at Amazon as a senior software development engineer, where I am right now.
So Asad, a lot of parents have asked us, what is tech? What is programming? What would you like to tell them?
So technology has existed before computers. So technology is basically any problem that is solved by one person, making it easier to be solved by the next person. So computers are not unique in that sense, and programming is just the ability to express a solution that computers can understand. So computers can solve problems while being programmed. Uh, and previously, like before computers, there were programmers, but they would not work with actual physical machines. They would work with manual computations.
So tell us about your personal coding journey. When did you get your first computer? How old were you when you first learned to code? What was your first coding project?
To code when I was 12 years old. This is grade 6 summer holidays. And the first computer I had was a 386. I don't remember that one too much, but it ran DOS 5.0. And then my second computer was a 486 DX2, which ran at 16 megahertz, and then it had a button on it that would go up to 25 megahertz. And that ran DOS 6.22 and later Windows 3.1. I used to play a lot of computer games on that. And what really got me into programming was I really wanted to know how those games worked. So I kept going through all the files that came with the game. This was on across like 21 floppy disks. And I looked at the exe files and I said, how can all this stuff that's in this text file, the stuff that's completely unreadable, how can it tell the computer what to do? Especially something as cool and awesome as a game. So that got me started down the rabbit hole. And eventually I taught myself programming and figured out exactly what goes into those exe files and how they work.
So, what would you like to tell an adult or a child that is, intimidated by programming, or perhaps feels that programming is something that should only be done by developers in a tech company?
It would be different for adults and children. So I'll go for adults first. The majority of adults I meet who are scared of computers had some experience, usually just one bad experience. Maybe it was a teacher in their childhood, or it was a math course that they didn't do well in. And they've sort of convinced themselves that this world of math and computers is not for them. And that's not true at all. So, they look at people who sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, sometimes more, and they're like, well, we could never do that. And so they disassociate themselves with all things related to computers. And that's really unfortunate because computers are really changing everyone's lives. In every single domain that exists today, computers are completely changing the game. And so not understanding what computers can and cannot do is a major disadvantage in the world today. So I would highly recommend anyone who thinks they can't learn programming to rethink that. Everyone can understand the basics of software development. It is extremely natural and extremely simple. Uh, so the other answer would be for kids. For kids, I think it's almost all the kids I've met are very inquisitive in their nature. So when you show them something, their natural tendency is to want to learn to figure out how it works. And I think introducing children to the intricacies of software development early gives them a very strong intuition on what computers can be used to solve, what problems are difficult and what problems are easy, and how to apply computers to whatever space they find interesting. During the time I was growing up, computers had not sort of, so to speak, taken over the world. But now I think that the world is different. Every single thing involves a computer. I think I was one of the last generations that grew up without a cell phone. Uh, but now everything on your cell phone is programmable. You can have applications running that require tremendous amounts of computation, and they're all available. They're all easy to run on today's hardware. And everywhere you look, you'll see software and computers being applied to change what was there before, whatever manual process was there before. So I think it's critical for everyone to look into and inquire as to how do the things around them work. Like if you come across, for example, if you pay for something at a counter at a grocery store and you swipe your credit card, try and think about how that works. And you might find that if you apply this inquisitive nature to different places, like if you look at a game, you're like, man, how does that game work? That game is a lot of fun to play. How did someone make that? What went into making it? What makes it difficult? What makes it fun? What makes the graphics good or bad? That gets people started down the correct path to understand the world around them. And specifically with computers being so prevalent, you'll also go into that rabbit hole of figuring out how computers work. I think programming is a lot of fun, at least for me, because it's extremely powerful. It is probably the most powerful tool available to human beings today. And sort of, I'm an engineer at heart, so I love all sorts of tools. I love, screwdrivers and laser thermometers and all that kind of stuff. So this is the most complex and powerful tool that is available to us. And we can solve problems in any domain more efficiently than has ever been possible in the history of mankind. And I think it's knowing that if you can remember what it feels like wanting to solve a problem with computers and then learning programming to solve those problems, there's nothing more satisfying, I think, than doing that.
So I think, a lot of the questions so far have been inward looking or looking back. But if you have to look up and out, what problems do you see in the tech space today? Or, what big problems do you think coding can solve?
So I think we're still in the first wave of tech. The first wave of tech is when computers are being used to solve problems that were previously solved without computers. And generally what that means is that you can write kind of mediocre software, use mediocre hardware, and you will still be leaps and bounds better than whatever manual process existed before. Even with marketplace models, like the outreach that you can get, the ability to reach people in all corners of the world via the internet, and a website is so powerful that actually the quality of the website doesn't matter that much. And so a lot of software development we see these days, I feel isn't as good as software can be. And that's primarily because it's competing with the ancient non-software technologies. And so I think the second generation or the second wave of tech will be when the quality of software actually decides whether or not a product is successful. And that second wave will require an entire generation of software developers that are better at doing their job than the current generation. So in order to address that problem, we have to raise the bar of software development across the board. And that means having an entire generation of software developers who have a strong intuition for understanding what is the correct way to solve problems using software.
And so, what would be the best way to inculcate that correct mindset for problem solving? So, because this bears more diving into, because I've heard this time and time again from everyone in the tech industry, where it's not an issue of coding syntax or knowing coding syntax, because we're churning out tens of thousands of programmers that are perhaps unemployable in the face of a lot of tech companies. And it's because of this mindset that everyone keeps talking about. And so, schools perhaps get a lot of flack for still teaching mental math when calculators exist. But I think the idea really is to teach a certain kind of fundamental so that it becomes automatic. You have to read every day so that it's not difficult to do, it happens effortlessly. And so, is it that you need to start teaching programming early on so that this kind of problem solving, iteration, computational thinking mindset gets set in stone, or does something extra need to be done?
So what we need for the second generation of software is to have software engineers that have a very strong intuition for what is the simplest, most elegant way to solve a problem. And that intuition can only be uh, inculcated in a person if they are introduced to the concept of software development very early in their life. So if we have kids who are exposed to things like software development or trying to solve complex problems like making a complicated game, they will develop this intuition of finding ways to simplify that so that they can focus on the fun stuff of making the game and playing the game. And that actually has a side effect of making the software simpler as well and easier to work with, which in turn actually will lead to higher quality software being written by this new generation of software developers. I think during the time I was growing up, computers had not sort of, so to speak, taken over the world. But now I think that the world is different. Every single thing involves a computer. I think I was one of the last generations that grew up without a cell phone. Uh, but now everything on your cell phone is programmable. You can have applications running that require tremendous amounts of computation, and they're all available. They're all easy to run on today's hardware. And everywhere you look, you'll see software and computers being applied to change what was there before, whatever manual process was there before. So I think it's critical for everyone to look into and inquire as to how do the things around them work. Like if you come across, for example, if you pay for something at a counter at a grocery store and you swipe your credit card, try and think about how that works. And you might find that if you apply this inquisitive nature to different places, like if you look at a game, you're like, man, how does that game work? That game is a lot of fun to play. how did someone make that? What went into making it? What makes it difficult? What makes it fun? What makes the graphics good or bad? That gets people started down the correct path to understand the world around them. And specifically with computers being so prevalent, you'll also go into that rabbit hole of figuring out how computers work.
So thank you for your time, and that we're at the end of the roster of our questions.
Thank you, Sada, for inviting me to Tech Talk Tuesday. It was a lot of fun being here, and I look forward to the next episode.
Likewise. Bye.